The rain was an old friend in Seattle, a constant whisper against the window panes, a comforting rhythm that underscored the city's unique pulse. In 1995, it was more than just precipitation. It was the very essence of the Pacific Northwest, a mood, a pervasive backdrop to a city finding its voice amidst the raw, unpolished energy of grunge, the aromatic steam of independent coffee houses, and the quiet, anticipatory hum of a burgeoning tech industry that hadn't yet fundamentally reshaped its character. Sarah Jenkins, 20 years old, felt this rhythm deep in her bones, a syncopation with her own thoughtful, introspective nature. A third-year literature student at the prestigious University of Washington, she thrived on the city's melancholic beauty, its rich intellectual buzz, and the comforting anonymity it afforded her, a stark, often welcome contrast to her more structured suburban upbringing. Sarah lived in a cozy, slightly drafty but character-filled apartment on the third floor of a sturdy brick building in Capitol Hill, just 3 vibrant blocks from the eclectic chaos of Broadway. Her days followed a predictable, yet deeply fulfilling pattern. Mornings were reserved for the hallowed, ivy-clad halls of UW, where she would lose herself in the challenging complexities of critical theory or the intricate narratives of forgotten authors, her mind alive with ideas. Afternoons found her diligently working at the Page-Turner, a beloved, slightly dusty independent bookstore on Pike Street, its towering shelves groaning under the weight of countless stories, its air thick with the indelible scent of aged paper, rich leather, and freshly brewed espresso. Here, she'd recommend obscure poetry collections or engage in spirited, intellectual debates about the merits of a new literary release, with the kind of quiet passion and genuine insight that earned her a small but fiercely loyal following among the bookstore's regular patrons. Evenings often concluded with a late-night study session in her sun-drenched, on rare occasions, bay window overlooking a leafy street, or a strong, dark roast coffee shared with her best friend, Emily Carter, at the Daily Grind, a perpetually buzzing, neon-lit cafe just around the corner, its windows often fogged with warmth. Sarah possessed a fierce intellect, a quick, understated wit, and a quiet intensity that, despite her reserved demeanor, drew people effortlessly to her. Her bright, inquisitive blue eyes, often framed by soft wisps of dark brown hair she'd unconsciously tucked behind her ears when deep in thought, seemed to absorb every minute detail of the world around her. She was an observer, a meticulous reader, a relentless seeker of truths often buried beneath the surface, constantly annotating the margins of her own unfolding life with intricate thoughts and profound observations, charting her own course through the complex landscape of existence. Her parents, Mary and Robert Jenkins, lived a comfortable, meticulously organized suburban life in Redmond, a world away from Sarah's more bohemian, intellectually charged urban existence. Yet, despite the geographical distance, they remained a strong, loving anchor in her life. Sarah called them every Sunday evening without fail, a cherished ritual unbroken since she'd left home for college, a steadfast connection across the miles. She'd recount tales of her latest academic triumph, particularly challenging novels she was devouring for a demanding seminar, or the quirky, endearing habits of some of her more eccentric regular customers at the bookstore. They worried, as all loving parents do, about her independent spirit, her late-night walks through the sometimes unpredictable city streets, and the subtle, occasionally unsettling undercurrents of urban life. But they trusted her judgment, her inherent street smarts, and her meticulous caution. Seattle, for all its edginess and its reputation for a certain kind of artistic rebellion, felt safe enough for their sensible, intelligent daughter. The fall of 1995 brought with it an unusual, penetrating chill to the Puget Sound, a sharper, more biting quality to the air that hinted at the approaching winter, and a perpetual, low-hanging gray sky that seemed to press down on the city, shrouding it in a beautiful, almost gothic melancholy. Sarah, however, found an odd, introspective comfort in it. It was, she often mused to Emily, the perfect weather for thick, oversized wool sweaters, steaming mugs of Earl Grey tea, and the satisfying rustle of turning pages in a well-loved book. She was utterly immersed in a challenging postmodern literary theory seminar, often spending hours deep within the labyrinthine, hushed stacks of the Sazalo Library on campus. The rich, comforting scent of old paper, worn leather, and settled dust a familiar balm to her intellectually hungry soul. Her work at the Page-Turner was steady, the early, distant whispers of the holiday rush beginning to stir the usually placid, academic waters of the bookstore, bringing with it a more diverse and bustling clientele. She was meticulously saving up every spare dime, every tipsy dollar, for a grand, transformative backpacking trip across Europe after graduation, a deeply cherished dream she'd harbored since childhood, fueled by countless dog-eared guidebooks and endless hours spent poring over intricate maps of old-world cities, imagining herself wandering their ancient streets. But beneath this familiar, comforting rhythm, a subtle discord and almost imperceptible dissonance began to emerge. It started innocently enough, a feeling, a fleeting sensation of unease that she couldn't quite place, like a word perpetually on the tip of her tongue, just out of reach. She'd catch herself glancing over her shoulder more often on her walks home, a new habit she'd never had before, her senses suddenly heightened. The shadow of a figure lingering a little too long behind a particular lamp-post on a side street, the sound of distant footsteps seeming to quicken or slow in unnerving sync with her own. At first she dismissed it as mere exhaustion, the natural, if unwelcome, paranoia that any young woman might feel walking alone at night in any major city, Seattle included. Even in its safest, most charming corners, urban life held an inherent, subtle tension, a whisper of the unknown that could easily prey on an overactive imagination. Then came the small, unsettling incidents, tiny, inexplicable aberrations in her meticulously ordered world. A paperback she was certain she'd left on her nightstand the previous evening would inexplicably appear on her kitchen table the next morning. Her apartment door, usually double-locked with a heavy-duty deadbolt she meticulously checked twice before leaving, was on two separate occasions found slightly ajar or fully unlocked in the mornings, though nothing was ever obviously missing, no overt signs of forced entry, no discernible disruption of her belongings. She blamed herself, her own growing absent-mindedness, the creeping, insidious stress of midterms, the endless pages of dense academic prose. Emily, ever the pragmatist, ever grounded, suggested she was simply overthinking things, perhaps a bit run down from her demanding schedule. "You need a break, Sarah," Emily had urged one particularly gray afternoon over lattes, her voice laced with genuine concern. "Let's forget about Baudrillard for a night and go see a band down at the Crocodile this weekend. Shake off the cobwebs, get some perspective." Sarah tried valiantly to shake off the growing unease, to rationalize it away with logic and reason. She started consciously varying her walking routes home, sometimes taking a different bus, sometimes cutting through a less frequented park she rarely used, hoping to outsmart whatever phantom apprehension was slowly, insidiously tightening its grip on her sense of safety and security. She invested in a new heavy-duty chain lock for her apartment door, bolting it each night with a satisfying, albeit slightly unsettling, click. She even entertained the fleeting idea of getting a small, protective dog, just for the added company and a sense of security, but her landlord, a stern, elderly woman named Mrs. Petrov, would never, under any circumstances, allow it. The feeling persisted, however, a cold, persistent tendril wrapping itself around her once unshakable sense of security, a premonition she couldn't ignore. She decided against telling her parents. She didn't want to needlessly worry them from afar, didn't want to plant seeds of fear where there had only been trust. She only hinted at it once to Emily, a rare moment of vulnerability during a late-night study session fueled by stale coffee. "Sometimes, Em," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes wide with an unspoken fear, "I feel like I'm living in a particularly dark, unsettling novel, and I haven't quite figured out the plot twist yet. And it's definitely not the fun kind of suspense." Emily, ever grounded, merely told her to read a happier book, trying to lighten the mood, but a flicker of concern had crossed her face. The last time anyone definitively saw Sarah Jenkins alive was the evening of Friday, October 27, 1995. The rain that day was coming down not in a whisper, but in relentless, driving sheets, drumming a furious, almost violent rhythm against the large plate-glass windows of the page-turner. Sarah had just finished her shift around 9:30 p.m. Her manager, a kind but perpetually harried man named Mr. Henderson, ever mindful of his young staff's safety, offered her a ride home in his beat-up Ford Escort, which idled patiently at the curb, its wipers struggling against the deluge. Sarah, despite the torrential downpour, politely declined, her voice soft but firm, a faint, weary smile playing on her lips. "No, thank you, Mr. Henderson," she'd said. "I actually enjoy the walk even in this. It helps me clear my head, unwind." She had her thick olive-green wool coat buttoned up high to her chin, its hood pulled snugly over her head, her worn leather satchel slung across her shoulder, containing not only her sturdy umbrella but also a newly acquired paperback of Raymond Carver stories and her slender wallet. She waved goodbye to a couple of her bookstore colleagues, a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture of farewell, before stepping out into the slick, lamplit street, where the reflections of neon signs fractured into shimmering streaks on the wet asphalt. The air was bitingly crisp, carrying the strong, earthy scent of wet concrete, decaying leaves, and the distant, briny tang of Puget Sound. Her usual preferred route home would have taken her directly down Pike Street, then a familiar climb up a few blocks into the bustling heart of Capitol Hill. But on this particular night, fueled by that lingering, indefinable sense of unease, that cold premonition, she decided to deviate. She planned to cut through a quieter, more residential tree-lined street she sometimes used, believing it might feel less exposed, less public, and thus, paradoxically, safer. She walked past the blurred neon glow of bustling bars, the muted murmur of conversations spilling from dimly lit cafes, the occasional passing car splashing sheets of water from deep puddles at the curb. Everything felt normal, if a little more desolate than usual due to the unforgiving weather, the late hour. The city was a vast, indifferent canvas of moving lights and shadows, and Sarah was just one more figure disappearing into its immense, intricate urban tapestry. She never made it home. Saturday morning dawned gray and relentless, the rain still falling, but with a softer, more mournful cadence, a fitting accompaniment to the dawning dread. Emily Carter, clutching a bag of her favorite poppy seed bagels and 2 steaming lattes from the daily grind, knocked on Sarah's apartment door, a cheerful smile ready. They had planned to spend the morning holed up, reviewing notes for their shared Baudrillard seminar, a ritual they both cherished. No answer. Emily tried calling Sarah's landline then, growing increasingly worried, called her parents in Redmond. No one had heard from her since Friday evening. A sudden cold knot of ice tightened in Emily's stomach, twisting with a sickening, undeniable certainty. Sarah was meticulous, punctual, almost ritualistic about her plans. She didn't just not show up without a word, without a call. Not Sarah, not ever. By Saturday afternoon, Mary and Robert Jenkins were speeding towards Seattle, their faces etched with a raw, primal fear that words couldn't begin to capture, their worst nightmares already beginning to materialize. The drive felt interminable, each mile an agonizing stretch of uncertainty, of imagined horrors. They let themselves into Sarah's apartment, their hearts pounding with a terrifying mixture of hope and dread. They found everything eerily in place. Her worn copy of Wuthering Heights on her nightstand, her academic journals neatly stacked, her bed meticulously made, a half-empty teacup on her desk next to a pile of graded essays. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no forced entry, nothing immediately amiss. Yet her wallet was gone, but her apartment keys inexplicably hung on their usual hook by the door, which was double-locked from the outside. This small, contradictory detail, the locked door, the missing wallet, and the presence of her keys, immediately raised a series of blaring red flags for Robert, a man who built his life on logic and order. If she'd been home, she'd have her keys. If she'd gone out willingly and hadn't returned, where were they now? And why was the door locked from the outside, implying someone else had locked it upon leaving? The implications were horrifying, chilling them to the bone. The Seattle Police Department was notified, and the cold, often impersonal, bureaucratic machinery of a missing person investigation slowly, inexorably ground into motion. Detective Mark Harrison, a veteran of the Missing Persons Unit with 25 years on the force, a man whose career had seen too many promising lives cut short, was assigned the case. He was a man with deep-set, weary eyes and a sharp, cynical mind, the kind who'd seen enough of the city's underbelly, enough broken lives and shattered families, to know that disappearances were rarely simple, rarely concluded neatly. He started with the laborious basics, meticulous, hours-long interviews with Mary and Robert, with Emily, with Mr. Henderson at the Page Turner, and with Sarah's professors and classmates. He painstakingly built a profile of Sarah's routine, her friends, her habits, her aspirations, piecing together the last known moments of a bright young woman who had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions. The initial investigation was a furious flurry of activity, though to the Jenkins family, every second felt like an agonizing eternity, each passing hour a descent into deeper despair. Uniformed officers and plainclothes detectives canvassed Capitol Hill, Fremont, and the University District, showing Sarah's smiling photo, a vibrant, hopeful image taken from her UW student ID, to shopkeepers, apartment building managers, bus drivers, and anyone who might have seen her on that fateful Friday night. Flyers with her face, quickly printed by the thousands, began to pepper lampposts, coffee shop bulletin boards, laundromats, and community centers across the city, their edges curling and their colors fading slightly with each passing day of relentless rain. Local news channels, always eager for a compelling human interest story, picked up the narrative. UW student vanishes in Capitol Hill, police seek clues, their broadcasts featuring concerned anchors and grainy photos. Even the often cynical grunge scene, usually dismissive of mainstream news, momentarily paused its headbanging to share in the collective anxiety, a palpable unease spreading through the city, touching everyone. But days bled into weeks, and the initial leads, despite intense, round-the-clock effort, quickly dried up, leaving a bitter taste of frustration. No concrete witnesses reported seeing Sarah after she left the bookstore. In 1995, the pervasive network of security cameras that now blanketed urban centers was still a distant concept. Private surveillance was minimal, especially on the quiet residential street she might have taken. The torrential weather conditions on Friday night, the relentless pouring rain, had also worked against any potential physical evidence. Footprints, tire marks, dropped items, all would have been washed away within hours, leaving a clean, frustrating slate. The police painstakingly checked her landline phone records. A few calls to Emily, to her parents, to the bookstore, all accounted for, all perfectly normal, mundane. No suspicious outgoing calls, no long-distance anomalies that might suggest a secret life or an unexpected departure. Her bank account remained untouched. Credit cards, still relatively new and less commonly used by students in 1995, showed no activity. It was as if Sarah Jenkins had simply, inexplicably, evaporated into the dense, gray Seattle mist, leaving absolutely no trace. Detective Harrison's team explored every conceivable possibility with methodical precision. Was she a runaway? Her parents vehemently denied it, their voices cracking with disbelief and raw anguish. Sarah was far too responsible, too deeply connected to her family, too passionately dedicated to her academic pursuits and her future dreams of exploring the world. There was no history of mental health issues, no secret boyfriend who might have whisked her away, no known enemies, no involvement in drugs or any illicit activities that might explain a sudden disappearance. Was it an accident? A tragic fall into one of Seattle's many treacherous ravines, a sudden debilitating illness, a mishap at the waterfront. Search and rescue teams, aided by hundreds of dedicated volunteers, scoured nearby parks, the wooded areas around the university, the intricate network of trails in Discovery Park, and the vast, often treacherous waterfront, but found nothing, not a single clue, not a shred of evidence. The chilling, insidious idea of foul play became increasingly dominant, a horrifying, unspoken truth that the Jenkins family was forced to grapple with, day after day, hour after agonizing hour. Mary and Robert Jenkins were thrust into a suspended state of grief, an unbearable void that swallowed their days and haunted their nights. Robert, a quiet, analytical engineer, spent countless hours poring over meticulously detailed street maps of Seattle, tracing and retracing every possible route Sarah might have taken, convinced that he, with his methodical mind, could find a crucial detail the police had overlooked. Mary, once a vivacious and outgoing homemaker, became a mere shadow of her former self, her once bright eyes now perpetually red-rimmed and filled with a profound, unceasing sorrow. She tirelessly organized volunteer search parties, distributed thousands of flyers to every corner of the state, made endless, desperate phone calls, her voice hoarse from pleading for any scrap of information, any crumb of hope. They even hired a private investigator, a grizzled, retired cop named Frank Miller, known for his tenacious spirit and old-school contacts, but even his decades of experience and street smarts yielded no new breakthroughs, only more demoralizing dead ends and unanswered questions. The months turned into a year, then 2, then 5. Sarah Jenkins' case slowly, inevitably, faded into the grim, file-heavy category of a cold case. A thick, heavy binder tucked away in the deepest recesses of the SPD archives, revisited only sporadically by other detectives when a new, seemingly unrelated lead emerged, or by Harrison himself, who, for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, found he couldn't entirely let go of the bright-eyed literature student and the haunting memory of her parents' anguish. The posters, once crisp and hopeful, faded in the unrelenting rain and sunlight, peeled at the edges, and were eventually, mercifully, taken down by city workers. The local news stories stopped, replaced by newer, more urgent tragedies, newer headlines dominating the airwaves. Life in its brutal, indifferent march moved relentlessly on for everyone else. But for Mary and Robert, it remained irrevocably frozen on that damp, chilling October night in 1995, a permanent, agonizing timestamp in their lives. They kept Sarah's room exactly as she had left it, a silent, poignant shrine to a life interrupted, a constant, aching reminder of what was lost. Every unfamiliar car that slowed on their quiet suburban street, every unexpected late-night phone call, sent a fresh jolt of agonizing hope and terror through them, only to dissolve inevitably into crushing disappointment. The silence of their unanswered questions was the loudest, most deafening sound in their lives, a constant ringing in their ears. Emily, too, struggled profoundly with the loss. She eventually finished college, earned her degree in English, and embarked on a career in publishing, her literary aspirations fueled in part by Sarah's memory. But the ghost of Sarah, her vivacious, intellectual friend, walked perpetually beside her, an invisible companion. She visited Mary and Robert often, sharing cherished memories, crying with them over old photo albums, desperately trying to keep Sarah's unique spirit, her indelible spark, alive in their hearts and minds. She'd occasionally walk by the page-turner, now under new ownership and subtly modernized, and feel a sharp pang of both nostalgia and profound loss, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips as she remembered Sarah behind the counter, passionately recommending an obscure poet or engaging in a spirited debate about literary criticism. The city that Sarah had loved so fiercely, the very fabric of Seattle, became for Emily a complex place of both deeply cherished memories and profound, unshakable sadness, tinged with a permanent shadow. By 2004, 9 long, arduous years had passed since Sarah had vanished into the Seattle night. The city's landscape had shifted considerably, a testament to the relentless march of time and progress. The volatile dot-com boom and subsequent bust had come and gone, leaving in its wake a new generation of tech giants and a rapid, almost breathless pace of urban development. Cell phones, once a luxury, were now ubiquitous, and early smartphones were beginning to appear on the horizon, hinting at the technological revolution to come. The city itself felt denser, faster, more globally connected, its unique grunge-era soul now somewhat diluted, its independent spirit perhaps a little more commercialized, a touch less raw. For the Jenkins family, the relentless passage of time had only deepened the ache, softening the sharp, unbearable edges of immediate despair into a dull, constant, ever-present throb. They had learned, through sheer force of will, to live with the unanswered question, to breathe around the void, though they would never truly accept it. The wound remained, raw and unhealed, a permanent scar on their souls. Then in late October 2004, almost 9 years to the very day Sarah had disappeared, the phone rang at the Jenkins Redmond home, shattering the quiet afternoon peace with an insistent, almost jarring clamor. It was Detective Harrison, his voice sounding older, more world-weary and gravelly than they remembered from their darkest days, yet with an unmistakable, almost electric tremor of urgency that instantly seized their attention, drawing them back from the brink of quiet resignation. "Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins," he began, without preamble, his words measured but firm, "we have something related to Sarah, a significant development." Their hearts, long accustomed to disappointment and dashed hopes, leaped wildly, then plummeted with a familiar, sickening certainty, a roller coaster of emotion they knew all too well. How many times had they heard these words before, only for it to be a false lead, a cruel, fleeting flicker of hope that always, inevitably, dissolved into crushing despair? "What is it, Detective?" Mary managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper, a thin, fragile thread of sound against the vast, heavy silence of their living room. Robert stood rigidly beside her, his hand instinctively gripping hers, his knuckles white with tension, his gaze fixed on the receiver as if willing it to speak the truth. Harrison explained the circumstances, carefully, methodically, his voice betraying a rare mixture of professionalism and personal investment. A construction crew working on a new mixed-use development in a forgotten, neglected patch of land between Capitol Hill and the rapidly transforming Denny Regrade area, a zone undergoing significant, almost brutal, urban renewal, had unearthed something highly unusual. They were excavating deep for a new building's foundation, digging deep into the dense, clay-rich earth, when the powerful digging machine struck a surprisingly resilient object, not bedrock, not an old utility line, but something distinctly organic yet encased. Careful, painstaking investigation by the crew and then by a specialized forensic team, immediately called in due to the unusual nature of the find, revealed a tightly sealed, waterproof PVC pipe. Approximately 2 feet long and 6 inches in diameter, buried almost 10 feet deep beneath what had once been a small, overgrown urban wildland, a thicket of tangled blackberry bushes, scraggly fir trees, and discarded urban detritus. This particular area had, by some quirk of city planning or sheer neglect, remained largely untouched by previous development, deemed too steep, too awkward, or simply too insignificant for building, until the relentless, unforgiving push of Seattle's modern growth finally reached it, disturbing its long slumber. Inside the pipe, meticulously protected from the relentless moisture and corrosive march of time by layers of plastic sheeting and a desiccant pack, was a small, leather-bound journal. Its cover, remarkably well preserved, was embossed with a subtle, intricate Celtic knot design, a detail that made Mary gasp audibly, her hand flying to her mouth, tears instantly welling in her eyes. It was Sarah's. The journal she'd received from her beloved grandmother for her 18th birthday, a cherished, deeply personal gift, the one she always carried in her worn satchel, filled with her private thoughts, her keen observations, her nascent poetry, her ambitious academic plans. It was an unmistakable piece of her, a tangible, physical relic from the past, now resurfacing with a shocking, almost miraculous presence, a silent, haunting voice reaching out from the grave. Detective Harrison, accompanied by a younger, sharp, and eager detective named Amelia Reynolds, known for her meticulous attention to cold cases and her background in forensic psychology, brought the journal, now carefully documented, cataloged, and processed by forensic experts, to the Jenkins home the following afternoon. The air in their living room was thick, almost suffocating, with a terrifying mixture of anticipation, dread, and a fragile, almost unbearable hope that thrummed painfully in their chests. Mary, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the object, recognized Sarah's neat, flowing script on the very first page, a familiar, heartbreaking sight that sent a fresh wave of grief through her. The initial entries chronicled her daily life, her classes at UW, her shifts at the Page-Turner, her dreams for Europe, her everyday anxieties and joys, all exactly as she told them on the phone every Sunday, a comforting, yet now haunting, echo of normalcy. But as they slowly, painfully, hesitantly turned the pages, a darker, more insidious narrative began to unfold, revealing a terrifying truth that chilled them to the bone, colder than any Seattle rain. The entries from early October 1995 began to mention, with increasing frequency and alarming detail, the feeling Sarah had been having. "I feel watched," one entry read, dated October 10th. Not just a general city paranoia, the usual urban hum of unease, but a specific, cold, unsettling awareness. Like someone is studying me, learning my patterns, observing my every move with an unnerving intensity. She wrote about the inexplicable instances of her apartment door being found unlocked, the book subtly moved, her initial dismissals of these strange occurrences as mere absent-mindedness, a trick of a tired mind. She meticulously detailed her new walking routes, her conscious attempts to shake the feeling, to evade this unseen, malevolent presence that was slowly tightening its invisible grip on her sense of safety and privacy. She wrote of the gnawing unease, the subtle, disturbing shifts in her world that she couldn't explain, but which she instinctively knew were profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. Then, an entry from October 25, 1995, just 2 excruciating days before she disappeared, painted a horrifying, vivid picture. "He spoke to me today, on the quiet tree-lined street near the small park I sometimes cut through on my way from campus. Said his name was Michael. Asked if I knew a good place in the city for obscure poetry, a question too perfectly tailored, too utterly coincidental, considering my job, my passion. I felt my skin crawl, a cold dread washing over me that made my breath catch. He had eyes that didn't quite meet mine, but seemed to see everything, penetrate every defense, every carefully constructed barrier. Tall, thin, dressed in a dark, nondescript coat, his voice was soft, almost gentle, yet it still resonated with an underlying tone of menace, a palpable, suffocating threat. I pretended I was in a terrible hurry, mumbled an excuse about a looming deadline, and walked away quickly, almost running, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't recognize him from the bookstore, from any of my classes, or from campus. He just appeared like a shadow-given chilling, articulate form emerging from the mist. The chilling, precise description of Michael sent a profound shiver down Robert's spine, a cold, sickening realization. Sarah had never mentioned this encounter, nor the man to them, nor to Emily, fearing perhaps that they would dismiss her concerns as overblown, the product of an overly vivid imagination. This was new, vital, and utterly terrifying information, a concrete lead finally emerging from the 9 years of agonizing silence, a name to attach to their nameless fear. The final entry, dated October 27, 1995, penned just hours before she vanished from the face of the earth, was brief, almost frantic, her usually neat script now jagged and rushed, reflecting her mounting terror. "Saw him again. Near the page-turner, he just stood there across the street, partially obscured by the relentless rain and the dim streetlights, watching. He didn't approach, didn't call out, didn't make a move, just watched. I felt sick to my stomach, a paralyzing fear taking hold, draining all strength from my limbs. Decided to take the longer, residential way home tonight, the one that winds through the quieter blocks, hoping to lose him, to shake this pervasive dread. I'm truly scared. I think he knows where I live now, or wants to know. I need to tell someone, but who would believe me? It sounds so dramatic, so fictional, like something out of one of my books. I just want to be safe. I just want to go home. The entry abruptly ended there, a chilling, incomplete thought. No more pages, no more words from Sarah. Only the stark, haunting emptiness of the following blank pages, a chilling testament to a vibrant life brutally cut short, a narrative tragically silenced mid-sentence. The discovery of the journal was a seismic event, not a resolution, but a powerful, devastating reopening of the wound that had never truly healed. The Seattle Police Department, now equipped with significantly more advanced forensic tools, sophisticated data analysis capabilities, and an understanding of cold case methodologies that had evolved dramatically since 1995, launched an immediate and comprehensive renewed investigation, pouring fresh resources into the once stalled case. Michael, once a phantom fear, now became a real, tangible person, a horrifying, shadowy figure finally brought into sharp, terrifying focus by Sarah's own meticulous words. Detectives, led by a re-energized Harrison and the diligent Reynolds, meticulously combed through old missing persons files, cold cases with similar modus operandi, and reports of suspicious individuals from the Capitol Hill area around 1995, now searching specifically for a Michael who fit the description and timeline. They reviewed hundreds of old witness statements, looking for any mention, however fleeting or tangential, of a man fitting Sarah's chilling description, scrutinizing every piece of information through the new, agonizing lens provided by the journal. They even consulted with behavioral profilers from the FBI to try and gain a deeper psychological understanding of the type of individual who would engage in such calculated predatory stalking, seeking patterns and motives. The media, always hungry for a new angle on a cold, compelling human story, seized on the journal's contents with renewed vigor, pushing the narrative into national headlines. Sarah's raw, unfiltered words, her profound fear, her desperate final moments, resonated powerfully with a new generation of readers and viewers, capturing their imaginations and their deepest sympathies, turning a forgotten case into a poignant, chilling warning. The story spread far beyond Seattle, a tragic echo from the past finally finding its undeniable voice, a testament to a young woman's courage in documenting her own terror. Mary and Robert Jenkins, who had retreated from the harsh glare of the public eye years ago, were once again thrust into the media spotlight, their quiet, private grief once again made painfully, inescapably public. But this time, amidst the renewed sorrow, there was a flicker of something new, something almost empowering amidst the agony, a tangible purpose, a clear direction to their ongoing anguish. The journal gave Sarah a voice, a chance to tell her own story from beyond the grave, a narrative that had been brutally, cruelly silenced for 9 long, agonizingly silent years. It provided crucial context, a terrifying narrative thread that had been conspicuously absent for so long, preventing true understanding. It was a profound, heartbreaking testament to her courage, her keen intelligence, her raw instinct for danger, and her desperate, ultimately unfulfilled, will to survive. The renewed investigation into Michael proved to be immensely challenging, despite the groundbreaking new information. 9 years was an impossibly long time in a rapidly changing city like Seattle. Memories fade, witnesses move away or sadly pass on, potential evidence degrades, and the urban landscape itself transforms, erasing old landmarks and creating new ones, blurring the past. Seattle had undergone a complete metamorphosis, a process that complicated efforts to trace a phantom from nearly a decade ago. But armed with Sarah's own haunting words, Harrison and Reynolds now had a clearer, more defined picture of their elusive quarry, a name and a description, however brief, that focused their search. They utilized advanced composite sketch artists to try and bring Michael to life based on the journal's brief but precise description, and the vague, often contradictory, memories of people who might have seen a suspicious man fitting the general description in the Capitol Hill area back then. The focus of the investigation had subtly but profoundly shifted, from the broad, almost impossible question of what happened to Sarah to the more precise, terrifying query of who was Michael and what did he ultimately do to Sarah. The journal was a gift, a profound curse, and a heartbreaking echo from the past, a bittersweet offering. It didn't bring Sarah back. It didn't, in the immediate aftermath, lead to an immediate arrest or a neat, satisfying resolution to their long nightmare. But it confirmed the Jenkins' deepest, most primal fears and, in a way, heartbreakingly validated Sarah's unspoken terror, her chilling premonitions, proving she wasn't just imagining things. It gave them a starting point, a new, albeit torturous path in the labyrinthine search for answers. The agonizing question of where Sarah was, where her body lay, remained, a gaping, festering wound that refused to close, even with this new understanding. But the question of why, and more chillingly, who had suddenly gained terrifying, undeniable clarity, giving their grief a new, piercing focus. The city of Seattle, forever entwined with Sarah's tragic story, continued its relentless, rainy rhythm. But now, whenever the rain fell over Capitol Hill, a new shadow was cast, the ghost of a student, her words finally unearthed, whispering a chilling truth across the years, reminding everyone that some mysteries never truly die, they only wait patiently for a voice to speak from the deep. And sometimes that voice comes not from the living, but from the well-preserved pages of a long-lost journal, found 9 years later, carrying the final, haunting message of a vibrant life brutally cut short. The tireless, agonizing search for Michael continued, fueled by the fragile, yet agonizingly persistent hope that Sarah's journal, her final, silent scream for help, would finally lead them to the truth, and perhaps to a measure of hard-won justice for the bright young woman who disappeared into the indifferent, rainy Seattle night of 1995.